I think the parallel you draw between Rockefeller as a robber baron around not just oil, but created the big finance and created big pharma. Yeah. Now, Rockefeller had very intimate connections with IG Farben. There was a Standard Oil IG Farben company. And without the fossil fuels of Standard Oil, the IG Farben couldn't have either made the synthetic fertilizers or the fuels. And so, in effect, Hitler's regime required this partnership, and they played it out, even though the armies were fighting. And they looked like two opposite camps, but when it came to making money, it was the same camp. A very big part of Rockefeller's history has been captured by Lily Kay when she went through the archives in The Molecular Vision of Life, how the Nazi regime, as a eugenics regime, thinking some people was inferior and should be exterminated for keeping the superior race pure, that thinking then migrated, because Rockefeller was anyway in the States, and they started to call it social psychology as biological determinism, and said the skin-based determination, we are getting attacked. So let's go under the skin and look at the atoms of determinism. The word gene did not exist at that time. They called it atoms of determinism. And then Rockefeller paid research. 99% of the research shifted to molecular biology. Nobel Prizes shifted to molecular biology and the genetic determinism and genetic reductionism, which is part of the silencing of the real true health. To have health means to be whole. To be whole means your self-organized brilliance of your integrated body as a complex system, that wholeness is true health. That's what Ayurveda is based on. Even Ayurveda has been attacked in recent times. Coming back to the parallels, Rockefeller was behind because he was driving the chemical industry. When the wars were over, they said, oh my gosh, all these chemicals to sell. And they invented the Green Revolution and pushed the Green Revolution on India. Rockefeller, the World Bank, the USAID all worked together. And if the farmers of India are protesting today, it's a result of that initiative of Rockefeller. The Green Revolution in India. Most people don't realize what high cost India has borne, what high cost the state of Punjab has borne. Then you have Gates joining up with Rockefeller and creating the Alliance for the Green Revolution in Africa. And in his new book, which pretends to be a solution to climate change, I said, my God, what kind of stage has the world reached that absolute nonsense can pass as science? I mean, I'll give you just 3 examples from his chapter on agriculture, which he talks about how we grow things. So first of all, plants are not things. Plants are sentient beings. Our culture knows it. We have the sacred tulsi, we have the sacred neem, we have the sacred banyan. No, they are sentient beings. And there's so many people are awake to animal rights. I think we need more people awake to plant rights and really tell Mr. Gates, no, plants are not things. He goes on to celebrate Norman Borlaug, whose job, he was in the DuPont Defense Lab, whose job was to push these war chemicals by adapting the plants. And so he created the dwarf varieties because the tall varieties are free varieties. We just refuse, like we refuse chemicals. Our plants said no. I call them the first satyagrahis, the fight for truth. The plants said, sorry, don't want chemicals. They lodge. And Borlaug's semi-dwarf varieties are cited by Gates as a big invention. And then he says, we're eating food because of Borlaug. No, people are starving because of Borlaug. The farmers are dying because of Borlaug. Then he goes on, stands in front of a synthetic fertilizer plant and says, the biggest invention, and I'm so happy. I'm happier than I even look. Doesn't he realize synthetic nitrogen fertilizers are creating desertification, dead zones in the ocean, and nitrous oxide, which is a greenhouse gas? He's offering the problem as the solution. Then he goes on, talking about bad biology. He doesn't know that nitrogen-fixing plants can fix nitrogen non-violently. He says plants can't fix nitrogen. He needs to come to India and study. He needs to understand. And when he's pushing the fake meat and the impossible burger, I said he needs to come and cook dal. Once he learns how to make dal with good nitrogen-fixing plants, he won't have to speak the rubbish he's able to get away with. And finally, no, the methane doesn't come from factory farms. Yeah. Have you smelt methane behind nomadic tribes? Have you ever smelt methane behind our sacred cow in India? No, they don't emit methane. Methane is a result of intensive feed of beans to animals and putting them in these concentration camps, which then becomes emitted. That's why the K4 stink, the concentration animal farm operation, have a stink. You know what Mr. Gates wants to teach us? He says the cows emit methane because they have 4 stomachs. He calls them containers. I think we should sue him for undoing basic class 1 biology. And you've talked about how he took control of the WHO. He's trying to take control of the FAO. The FAO is based, Food and Agriculture Organization is based in Rome. It is what has recognized that ecological agriculture is the way to go and supported agroecology till last year, till Gates started to take charge. And now he's moving the food summit to New York. 500 organizations have said this is no more a food summit. It's a poison summit. The poison cartel and Bill Gates, the billionaires, are running it to push more poisons, now under new names. So we have a lot of work to do. 500 have said boycott, but we still need to come together. And we have to come together around truth and nonviolence and regeneration, and away from untruth and fakeness and violence and the degeneration of our bodies, our health, the planet, our minds. Look at the people who are sick. How many people have lost work? How many people have lost food? But how many people are sick? But in India, the farmers are doing fine. The villagers are doing fine. When people are healthy and eating healthy food, there is no problem. The problem is where they've already made people suffer. And now they want to make people suffer even more. And he wants to commit a crime against our gut microbiome, pushing more fake food through impossible food. And he wants to create conditions that real food will disappear. And that's why we all have to organize together. And the scientists have to start being protected, I think our job, Dr. Mercola, is there's an extinction taking place. They call it the 6th mass extinction. Mm-hmm. Most people think the 6th mass extinction is about other species. Mm-hmm. They don't realize large parts of humanity is being pushed to extinction. He wants us to be thingness, but we are beings. Both my book, Oneness versus the 1%, and then we did the Gates Tour, the Global Empire, where I realized he was entering every field that has to do with life. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Because our work in Navdanya, which means 9 seeds, is basically work on biodiversity and agriculture, we started to bring together all the work that he's doing mm-hmm. in taking over. So let me just run through. I mentioned the Rockefeller Green Revolution, now the Gates Rockefeller Green Revolution in Africa. The next step he wants to push is, he's not saying no to chemical farming, he's celebrating synthetic fertilizers, but he's now talking about digital agriculture, and he names it Gates Ag 1. And the headquarters of this is exactly where the Monsanto headquarters are, St. Louis, Missouri. Gates Ag 1 is one agriculture for the whole world, organized top down. He's written about it. We have a whole section on it in our new report, Gates to a Global Empire. Now, what does he want to do with digital? First of all, have the entire surveillance system introduced. I think we managed to stop a seeds of surveillance startup he was starting, where he would have liked farmers to not be allowed to grow seeds unless the surveillance system had approved them. But I have fought in my land and my country to have the freedom of seeds defended. Article 3J of our patent law says plant seeds and seeds are not invention, therefore cannot be patented. And interestingly, while this whole drama is going on the vaccine question, the rich countries that pretend to be doing Gates philanthropy have absolutely refused to do the waiver on intellectual property, showing very clearly it's about money making. It's all about money making. If you look at every vaccine, Gates has his finger in it. But coming back to the issue of one agriculture, digitalized, and then for this, they have to do data mining. They don't know agriculture. So Gates is financing the placing of people in farmers' homes in order to mine their data. Mm-hmm. How do they harvest? How do they thrash their fields? And everything. And then sell it back to them. And Bayer, which bought Monsanto, is doing that, putting out data collection like Google does. They put data collection, then they sell back the data to you. Interestingly, as far as the Impossible Burger is concerned, the Bayer has said very clearly, with the growth of plant-based food, well, all food is plant-based. Even animal food is plant-based, because everything begins with photosynthesis. Everything begins with plants. But you can eat real plants, or you can eat the fake food. Now, the growth of fake food, which is totally engineered. First, 3 years ago, I think they created an Eat Forum and started to talk about this being the solution to all chronic diseases created by industrial agriculture. And who's on board on the forum? Who's on board on fresh? The poison cartel, the Bayers, the Monsantos, the fertilizer industry. Bayer has said this demand for plant-based, which is another way of talking about fake food made in lab, basically it'll make an increasing demand on row crops, as they call them, and larger scale production. Now, no more of food, but of raw materials, of the carbohydrates, the fats, the proteins. So food is now being dismembered to become raw material for factories, which will be the lab. And he's driving this. But all this eventually begins in seed. So my work started on seed because the Monsantos wanted to patent it. I said, no, you don't invent the seed. You will not patent the seed. And we worked to create community seed banks, reclaim our seed freedom. Now, Gates controls all the seed supply. During the Green Revolution, the Rockefeller Green Revolution, I'll call it, the World Bank financed international research institutions. They collected all the seeds of the farmers, and they're in these gene banks, which have everything that farmers ever grew. Then the farmers were forced to grow chemical varieties and Green Revolution varieties. Now Gates controls all those CG systems. Gates is controlling the seeds of the world, research of the world, the knowledge of the world, through funding, of course. He's taking control. But control in this field means, and then he uses, you see, at that time, the patenting was done through genetic engineering by actually introducing genes. Now he does it through genomic mapping. Yeah. He's got all the collections. All you need is little bits of seed. Just read the genome. Your passport data tells you this is a drought-prone seed, a salt-tolerant seed. This one has a fragrant rice. You don't have to know anything. The passport data tells you this is what it is. You do a genomic map, take a patent. He has editors. See, he financed the research on gene editing to undercut all the biosafety laws of the world. But the only country which doesn't have biosafety laws is the United States. But the rest of the world does, because we have a UN treaty called the Biosafety Protocol, Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety, under the Convention on Biological Diversity. When he is creating appearance of philanthropy, what he's doing is giving tiny bits of money to very vital institutions. But with those bits of money, then attracting all the government money, which was anyway running those institutions. Yeah. But now, because of his clout, he is taking control of the agenda of the institutions, meantime, pushing patenting. And because he's pushing patenting, whether it be on drugs or on vaccines or on seeds, so the gene editing, which is the new GMO technique, and the first two applications had to back off because they said, this is not a GMO. And then John Fagan found a test which could detect that it is a GMO. And then they realized they could be sued because they wanted to sell it as natural, but take a patent. The company that is collecting the patents on gene-edited organisms, whether in health or in agriculture, is a company called Editas, started by the person who was the main financial investor for Gates Foundation. And Gates is a very, very big investor in Editas. So he has a company called Editas to edit the world as if it is a word program. The two scientists who got the Nobel this year have both been funded in their research. So you finance the research, you finance the public institutions, whether they be national or international, but you then invest and you force them down the path where they can only use what is your patented intellectual property. And as he has said in an interview, his smartest investment was vaccine because it is 1 to 20 return. 1 to 20 return. $1 put in, $20 made. But how many billions of dollars have been put in? So you can imagine how many trillions will be made. So at the end of it, where does food come from? It comes from seed. He wants to control it. Comes from land. He's controlling that. He's become the biggest landlord of America. And that's all over the place with Forbes and all. It doesn't even have to be investigative journalists digging this up. It's now the top financial news. But you need weather. You need a stable climate. So what could be a weapon of control on agriculture? Weather modification. He calls it geoengineering. This is engineering the climate, again, making it look like he's going to solve global warming by creating global cooling, by polluting the atmosphere. And in fact, there's going to be a campaign launched, and I've been asked to be part of that launch, where he's financing Harvard to do a geoengineering experiment. But this weather modification and modifying the Earth's balance is not just a way of destabilizing the Earth's climate systems more, but then taking into your hands the decisions you'll make to create a rain at harvest time, to create a drought when farms should be getting sowed. And we have had very strange occurrences. There's kind of a predictability of weather, and we know there's climate change. But somehow at harvest time now in India, you have to have horrible hailstorms, and the hailstones are sometimes that big. So weather modification, and worst, to me, the worst crime against the earth and against humanity is using gene editing technologies for gene drives, which is a collaboration of Gates with DARPA, the Defense Research System. And the gene drives are deliberate driving to extinction. Now, he does it in the name of ending malaria. No, it's about driving to extinction. Monsanto created superweeds by using Roundup-resistant soya and Roundup-resistant corn. Amaranth is one of the biggest superweeds. Amaranth is a sacred food for us, a very, very important source of nutrition, both in green as well as in grain. There's an application in that DARPA Gates report of driving the amaranth to extinction through gene drives. And when this was raised at the Convention on Biological Diversity, you know what he did? He actually hired a public relations agency and bribed government representatives to not say no. Can you imagine? He is corrupting the UN system. He's, of course, corrupted the governments already. We've seen that with the whole WHO phenomena. But now he's destroying the edifice we built over the last 20 to 30 years in protecting the global environment, whether it be the climate treaty, the biodiversity treaty, or the atmospheric treaties. He is absolutely behaving as in the UN is his subservient institution, governments and regulatory bodies should not exist and do not exist. And of course, people in democracy have no business to speak, otherwise they're conspiracy theorists. I think money, of course, has a role in this, otherwise he wouldn't need to do investment through his philanthropy. He'd do plain philanthropy, then he'd give and his money would keep decreasing, right? If I have 100 billion and every year I'm giving away a few billion, I should have less of it. Ordinary people are having to fight their individual battles when these are about institutional, structural, societal crimes. And they need to be taken up the way Rockefeller was taken up and Standard Oil was broken down. So all the empires, the Gates empire is multiple empires, but at the end of it, it's one empire. So definitely making more money, because those who fall into the trap of making money don't know when to stop. I call it the economy of the cancer cell. They don't know when to stop. But it is definitely power, the love for power. And I feel this kind of love for power, at the end of it, comes from deep fear. It comes from a deep fear of small people living joyfully in their freedom. Yeah, I got 100 million. How can that poor peasant love to till the soil? I'm going to take that away from them. So it's fear of freedom, the fear of the small, and the freedom of life without you. So, Regeneration International grew out of the fact that the organic was being totally attacked. And we knew that there had been a commodification of organic too. So we got together, and Ronnie and Andre and Hans Herren and I, we created the Regeneration International, which is an amazing movement. And definitely in the United States has picked up. And I noticed no matter what the movement, they're using the word regeneration now. It could be a health movement, it could be a democracy movement, it could be a peace movement, it could be a women's movement. Everyone has realized the regeneration is what we have to shift to. So what do we need to be doing in the next? For me, the next decade is the determining decade, because these petty minds, insatiable greed, wants to go so fast that if in the next decade we don't protect what has to be protected and build resilient alternatives and take away this sainthood from this criminal, they will leave nothing much to be there to be saved. So, when 87, I heard the chemical corporations, the poison cartel, which is also the big pharma, people think agriculture is here, medicine is here. No, the same criminal corporations gave us agrochemicals. They gave us bad medicine that creates more disease than it solves. So big pharma, big ag, big poison, all one. And Bill Gates is holding it all together even more and trying to make them bigger, because he has investments in all of them. All of them. He's constantly investing. So when I go back to when the chemical company said we'll own all the seed and no farmer will be allowed to save their seeds, and we'll have an international law, and all seeds will come from us. We'll be 5 companies and all seeds will be GMO and patented. And I said, no, you won't have your way. We'll save one seed at a time with all the love we can pour into that saving. And today, seed saving is a global movement. It's totally a global movement, the seeds freedom movement. So I think that's the first place we have to begin, because Gates wants our seeds. Gates wants our seeds. And I will be sending a letter to you and Regeneration very soon, because, when Iraq was invaded, one of the things done was an Iraqi Order 81 that made it illegal for Iraqis to use their own seeds. And then the Iraqis approached me about this Iraqi Order 81. And I'd been saving seeds. And I said, let's just call for seed freedom. And we started, I'd be building global movements anyway. So I'm hoping that we will be able to together launch a global movement soon to take back our seeds from our international seed banks. These are our public common goods. He cannot enclose them. The strategy is we need to remind the world that these are public institutions, that they're accountable to the farmers whose collections these are. His funding is meaningless. His funding is meaningless because if the farmers, as the true givers of seed, assert their rights. And I want to just remind you one more thing, Dr. Mercola. So, we drove out golden rice from India. Golden rice is this fake solution to vitamin A deficiency, hundreds of % inferior to the greens we can grow in our field. Gates is funding it in Philippines and pushing it and bypassing every safety law. But there's a huge Stop Golden Rice campaign in Philippines. We stopped in 2010. We stopped the BT eggplant in India through public hearings. Gates is funding it in Bangladesh. He would like to spread it to the world from there. So all the failed first generation GMOs and the next generation GMOs he'd like to control. So just the other day I did a webinar that these are failed technologies. The BT cotton failed. The farmers' suicides were because of its failure and the debt they created. So we need to tell that full story. So on the seed question, we've got to continue our seed freedom. On the food question, I think that's the big one, because food and health go like this, as you know better than anyone else. And, in Ayurveda, it says, Annam Sarva Aushadhi. Food is the best medicine. And if you don't eat good food, then no medicine can cure whatever disease you have. That the best medicine is good eating. And Hippocrates said, let food be thy medicine. So I think this is the time now to really grow a very, very big global campaign on food freedom. Food freedom means you cannot destroy our right to grow food. 2, you cannot destroy our government's obligations to us to support regenerative agriculture rather than support your digital agriculture and subsidize you. And the 3rd, I think we should give a call on boycott of his lab foods, because they need a lot of advertising and a lot of brainwashing in order to get there. But if we already announce the boycott, and on board are all the conscious eaters of the world, all the organic producers and eaters, and all the people working on health through food. I know so many cancer specialists who contact me, who've given up their practices in medicine and are only doing organic farming. Their clinics are the organic farms. They come here. You want to be treated? Come here. So I think we can let's work on this together. Dr. Mercola, I'm on board with you. Let us create a campaign from now, and we can do it in October. 16th of October is World Food Day.
Okay.
2nd of October every year, we launch a 2-week campaign on food freedom. We do it in Afghania forever and ever. Yeah. So from 2nd October, the world, Non-Violence Day, the day of Gandhi's birth anniversary, to 2 weeks of non-violent food systems. Yeah. Boycott food that's making you sick. Monsanto was the most powerful evil company then. It's gone. Yeah. Let's envision a world that a decade from now, just like Monsanto disappeared, Gates as a philanthropist will disappear. And his being the master of the universe idea will go, and he will go and do penance somewhere. I did a little book with the leading Ayurveda of India, Dr. Gangadharan, because these patents were coming out, the Impossible Burger patents, and then the Microsoft patent on us being users of their machines and algorithms, and the Google patent on putting nanoparticles in our blood to solve the problem of anemia. That's when I realized they've got into life sciences, Google. So this little book is called Two Futures of Food, Health, and Humanity. And my colleagues with whom I worked in Kerala, the people who did the Ayurveda bit, they put it as a Kindle. I think you can download it as Kindle. But to your listeners, I'd like to mention that in the first week of April, Annam is food, but food in its wholeness. We do a 5-day course. So it'll be on Zoom now, where we connect the issue of soil, biodiversity, healthy eating, and good health. So the Annam course will be on the Navdanya Earth University website, and people can visit the Earth University website and hopefully join. And finally, I've just on Women's Day released a new report written with women farmers, Earth Rising, Women Rising. We need to defend two things very much. Wherever we can, talk people to people. Don't give that up, because that's what they want to shut down, the people to people conversation. And from my culture, besides the ecology and the Ayurveda and all of that, what I've realized is, my God, our civilization was so clever. They attacked organic, we created regeneration. Now they're attacking regeneration, and everyone's going in a tizzy. I said, in India, we never created one word for one thing, because no one thing is just one thing, It is so many facets. So the Ganga has 1,000 names. The divine, feminine beauty has 1,000 names. We always gave 1,000 names. So they can attack one. We've still got 999. We will always, against the 1%, we will always have the diversity, multiplicity, and freedom of the 99%. When all the spiritual forces and all of nature's forces and most of people's forces are aligned together, what can 5 billionaires, technocrats, who want to be richer than they are, greedier than they are, more violent than they are, they don't count in the long run, really. So it's just that we cannot afford to not do the things we can do. And I think another part of this should be, big tech has already messed up. It's surveillance capitalism. Let big tech not enter our bodies. Let big tech not enter life sciences. I worked on nanoparticle assessments, and we said it can't be assessed. Don't go down that way. A technology whose safety you can't know should not be given permission to go ahead commercially.
Right. Precautionary principle.
Yeah, absolutely, the precautionary principle. So I think if you were to start pulling together all the homeopaths, the Ayurvedic physicians, the natural healers, these are people who make choices in their lives to do the right thing. And if they don't get together now, exactly what Carnegie and Rockefeller did to say all natural medicine is illegal, these guys will make life illegal. Living will be illegal, except as a little piece in their machine, under their permission, through their permission. The rest of you are throwaway people. Independent science, good, healthy knowledge that food is health, as Hippocrates said. Indigenous systems of learning, ecological agriculture, small farmers, in Bill Gates' design, all this that makes life life, that makes society society, that makes community community, that makes healthy beings. He would like to push this to extinction because he's afraid of independence and freedom and health and our beingness. So we have a lot of work to do. 500 had said boycott, but we still need to come together. And we have to come together around truth and non-violence and regeneration, and away from untruth and fakeness and violence and the degeneration of our bodies, our health, the planet, our minds. Look at the people who are sick. How many people have lost work? How many people have lost food? But how many people are sick? But in India, the farmers are doing fine. The villagers are doing fine. When people are healthy and eating healthy food, there is no problem. The problem is where they've already made people suffer. And now they want to make people suffer even more. And he wants to commit a crime against our gut microbiome, pushing more fake food through impossible food. And he wants to create conditions that real food will disappear. And that's why we all have to organize together. I'm very happy to be able to join from far away digitally your conference on deep renewability, deep regeneration, because to me that's what cradle to cradle means. That things regenerate, things recycle, things arise constantly in renewability, multiplicity. I'm very happy also that I can join you from India, which was the land of textiles. It was the factory of the world, which is why the East India Company wanted to come here. And then the British, as a result of their colonization, created an empire of cotton. They destroyed India's textiles, colonized the land of the indigenous people, not just in India, but of the Americas. And then they captured Africans as slaves. The issue of Black Lives Matter is all connected to the empire of cotton, because so much land was grabbed that you then had to grab slaves to be able to pick the cotton and then take it to the mills of Lancashire and Manchester and use the internal combustion engine that should never actually have been created to then dump on the very countries which they had colonized industrial clothing. And our freedom was led by Gandhi with his amazing imagination of nonviolence, where he said, I'm going to get freedom through the spinning wheel. Of course, no one was spinning by the time he returned from South Africa, and he found an old woman who would teach him how to spin. And he got the whole country to spin. And he said, as long as we can make our own clothing, we will be free. As long as we grow indigo and cotton under slavery and wear clothing of slavery, we will be enslaved. And we got our freedom through spinning our own cloth. It was called khadi, which is hand-spun and hand-woven clothing. It was to deal with the empire of cotton, of the empire of the mills, the satanic mills they used to be called, because they also exploited the workers in England. And I have had inspiration from the spinning wheel from the time I've been a child, but even more in my more recent years, dealing with the GMO question, the patenting of seed. And when in 87, I heard the companies talk about owning seed and genetically engineering seed and having an international treaty, the GATT, the Trade-Related Intellectual Property Rights, to force this on all our countries, my mind went back to the spinning wheel. And I said, in my life now, the seed will be the spinning wheel. And that's what I've done. And that's why I created Navdanya and have been saving seeds. But I grew up in a family where my parents, my mother was a freedom fighter, and we used to spin in the morning. And we used to dress in khadi, the hand-spun, hand-woven cloth. And around the time I must have been 6, 7 years old, this fossil fuel fiber, the nylon, was starting to emerge. And everyone was wearing it because it was fashionable. And we wanted to copy, young kids want to copy their peers. And we asked our mother, could we have a nylon frock instead of the khadi that we were wearing? And she said, I'll never stop you. You really want nylon? I'll get you a nylon frock. But just remember, when you wear nylon, you help the millionaire become a little richer and get his next Mercedes car. She did use the word Mercedes in India. And she said, if you wear hand-spun, hand-woven cloth, a poor woman was able to get their food for her children that night. And to me, this is early lessons of the circular economy injustice in economic terms, that returns go back to the people who are really creating our fabrics, our clothing, with their work, with their love. And since that time, I've only worn handmade clothing, and am every minute conscious of the full journey of what one wears. After all, clothes are our second skin. So much money is spent on skincare products. A little consciousness on our second skin would help the world a lot. And I'm so glad you are discussing these issues. I thought of the seed as a spinning wheel. I hadn't not realized that a decade later, Monsanto would bring illegally the GMO BT cotton seeds to India. And then very rapidly, they started to corrupt our regulatory systems and started to collect royalties, even though we did not allow patents on seed. In fact, we have a patent law that says plants, animals, and seeds are not human inventions. And I did a lot of work with our parliament to ensure this law would be passed. But Monsanto was collecting illegal royalties. So what's the circular economy of the seed? The circular economy of the seed is that the seed must become seed. It must go cradle to cradle. Circular economy of the seed is it must renew. It must be renewable seed. And all renewable seed multiplies. But even more importantly, living seed that goes cradle to cradle supports life. It doesn't just give rise to the next generation of seed. It supports pollinators and insects. And part of it goes back to the soil as organic matter. And then it supports the tremendous web of life that makes soils fertile. That's what organic farming is. And it's such a beautiful miracle in soil to have millions and billions of organisms that actually have been gifted from the organic matter that the seed gave us. In 1 cubic meter of soil, there is, let me just get these figures for you. In 1 cubic meter, 50,000 earthworms, 50,000 insects and mites, 12 million roundworms, algae, fungi, billions of bacteria. And in 100 grams of soil, 100 grams of soil, you know, we have a whole book with my 36 years of research on basically economies of regeneration, economies of recycling. And when the GMO cotton was introduced illegally, I want to insist it was illegal. I took the case to Supreme Court of India, and Monsanto was prevented for 4 years from selling those seeds. They were spreading them illegally. They're still spreading BT cotton Roundup Ready seeds, also illegally. But the first thing that they interrupted was the well-being of the farmer. Because they were collecting royalties even though they didn't have a patent. 5 rupees was the cost of seed before Monsanto came, of cotton seed. And now they were selling it at 4,000 rupees a kilogram. And we never grew cotton in monocultures throughout my life till the late 90s. Cotton would be with millets, would be with the pigeon pea, would be with all the crops a farmer needs. And therefore there was never a distress. And farmer always sold at a good fair price. It was called a cash crop. But Monsanto's BT cotton violated every law of the circular economy. It was a hybrid BT cotton, so the seed did not go to seed. It could not be saved. It did not perform the functions, the ecological functions of living seed. Our studies have shown that there is not a single pollinator on a BT cotton plant, not one. And then on the soil, it's an even more violent assault, because what is Bt cotton but shooting with a gene gun Bt toxins into the plant cells? And now it's expressing at every moment a high dose toxin, 64 times more toxic than the naturally occurring. And it's in the roots, it's in the leaves, it's in the pollen. Pollen means the bees don't come. Roots and leaves means the soil organisms are dying. And we did a study a few years ago. We did it 10 years after Bt cotton. We did an updated study with the top soil ecologist of India. And across 5 districts of the heart of the Bt cotton area, we found average of 50% fungi, which includes the mycorrhizal fungi, have disappeared. And even more shocking, 77% of the soil bacteria have gone. You know, after all, if you have organic matter and there's a leaf and there's mulch, that mulch is turned into living soil by bacteria. That's the decomposition's circular economy of soil fertility. And the organisms that allow this circular economy of the soil to be created are being killed. And the farmers themselves, because of the very high cost of seed and the fact that it's non-renewable, ended up being in debt and committing suicide. So India has lost, since globalization in the middle of the 90s, about 400,000 farmers. And the fact that the Indian farmers are protesting on the streets. And today there's going to be a bit of violence. Police is trying to remove them from the protests. But they're there because of the debt and the suicides and the crisis and the new laws which will make the crisis worse. 400,000, and our studies going home to home and looking at district data shows that where there's Bt cotton, there's suicides. Now, 85% of the suicides of India, farmer suicides of India, are related to Bt cotton. 85%. So that's not a circular economy. And this is the reason it has become so very important to create a circular economy for clothing and textiles, beginning from the seed to how textiles are made, to the consumer economy, to what fibers do we use, what dyes do we use. What I have watched happen to junk food is exactly what's happening to junk clothing. More resources are used to produce it, more capital is used to produce it, and miraculously it turns out cheaper. And that's why the issue of true cost is so important. I've done a book called The True Cost, and I know there's a film called True Cost linked to the textile industry and all the levels of violence, the workers, the young women who died in the factory in Bangladesh, farmers, but even the ones who wear the clothing. You know, for me, clothing is part of you. It's your expression of who you are. And that's why we've had diversity of clothing around the world. We've now managed to create a monoculture where everyone is in the same t-shirt and the same blue jeans. And just the brand name is different, but the brand name is put after the same clothing is made in the same slave factories. Somewhere it goes up to high-end fashion stores and somewhere it goes down to fast fashion stores. But fast fashion and fast clothing for me is wearing clothes that express thoughtlessness, an indifference to the ecological cost to the earth, and indifference to conditions of those who are working on farms and factories to make our clothes, and indifference to our unique identity and conscious choice. Fast fashion makes me a thoughtless clone of millions of others wearing the same throwaway clothing of the same color, irrespective of the culture and climate to which I belong. Fast fashion molds us into identity-less customers and consciousness-less customers. We don't exercise our choice because we are not guided by awareness and consciousness. We become mannequins in the assembly line of throwaway clothing. The assembly line must churn faster and faster to sell more and more and waste more and more clothing. Instead of cloth being woven in every home, clothes being stitched at home or by tailors down the street. Everyone is buying clothing from a handful of chains, with exploitation at every level of the supply chain. What's even more disturbing to me is that it's predicted that clothes consumption will rise by 63%, while more and more people are without clothes because they're throwaway people. They have no work, they have no livelihoods, they can't buy the clothes. So it's a small group of people, and the consumption is increasing 63%. And this means an increase of 62 metric tons to 102 metric tons in 2030 of shirts alone. Fashion goods are purchased even when the old ones are still totally wearable. The quick response model and new supply chain practices of fast fashion even accelerate the speed of it. In recent years, the fashion cycle has steadily decreased to fast fashion retailers selling clothing that is expected to be disposed of after a single wear. We've moved from disposable plastic bags to disposable clothing. This dramatically shortens the consumer's buying cycle. Quick changing stocks, low price fashion goods encourage consumers to visit the stores and make purchases more frequently. As a result, excessive stock and untrendy clothes end up in landfills. They're also contributing, the whole supply chain is contributing to greenhouse gases, and I'm sure in your conference you discussed of how much is contributed. 85% of the plastic pollution, while looking forward to meeting with you today, I just went through some of my recent writings, and look at the titles of news. Cyborg babies, scientists find microparticles in a mother's womb for the first time. 85% of the microplastic in life in the ocean comes from clothing. And none of this was thought through. And we are trying desperately to stop it. How do we change? Where do we begin? I think we begin with each of us. I went back to my inspiration in Ghana. And we have created seed banks of organic cotton, where the seed can go to seed and there can be a circular economy of seed. But these are community seed banks, so there's a circularity of seed exchange. I'm very happy in every village where we work, farmers have stopped growing GMO cotton. And the GMO cotton is now proven to be a failure to do the one job it was supposed to do, control pests. There are more pests, there are more pesticide use. 3 years ago, I had rushed down to Vidarbha because 130 farmers had died of pesticide poisoning, spraying on BT cotton crops where you were never supposed to spray pesticide because this was supposed to be an alternative. So we started, of course, to start with the seed. We work with organic cotton because we've built Navdanya, the organic movement, over these 36 years. I started the organic when the protests in '84 happened in Punjab. But then we've joined up with the Gandhi ashrams for hand spinning and hand weaving. And I call it the fibers of freedom. Call it fibers of freedom because it's freedom of the seed to renew. It's freedom of the spinner and the weaver to have a livelihood and dignity. It's the freedom from toxics because we use only vegetable dyes. It's freedom from being part of supply chains that are causing so much harm to the earth, so much harm to future generations, so much harm to the workers. It troubles me a lot that in a short 30 years of globalization, we've forgotten that cloth is woven. The word weaver has gone. I mean, as a result of our independence, we brought back our textiles. We made it the center stage to have policy of handmade, hand-woven fabrics. The shawl I'm wearing is a tie and dye shawl. And these clothes last. I think this shawl must be 50 years old. I'm still wearing my mother's saris. And they never give up. And even if they do, then you can turn it into a spread, you can turn it into a curtain, you can turn it into a quilt. Good clothing never becomes waste. It's always in a circularity of recycling. So last year was 150 years of Gandhi. And I'd been called to give the annual lecture, Gandhi lecture. And at the museum and archives, they showed me this very beautiful fabric. Not this one, but in the archives. And this was a sari that Gandhi had woven by hand for his wife Kasturba. That maroon, we call it manjishtu, it comes from a plant. And he had dyed it himself. And he had stitched the hem himself. And my computer bag is another example of how to have a circular economy. So it's hand-woven, hand-spun with organic cotton from our farmers, but every leaf is hand-printed with vegetable dye. Of course, the background is indigo. And, we had been enslaved for indigo. Before the British colonialism, one bag of indigo used to exchange for a bag of gold. Then they made it slave conditions. So our people were slaves to grow indigo, and then it was really exchanged for blood. We've made indigo a color of freedom again, and every leaf has been hand-dyed. I think we have to bring love and care back into the economy, whether it is the economy of food or it is the economy of clothing and textiles. The ability of our creativity has been killed. And we will not be able to end exploitation till we bring our heads, our hands, and our hearts back into the economy. I know it's totally doable. We've done it with fibers of freedom and foods of freedom. And our farmers are earning 10 times more by getting rid of the supply chain that's supposed to make them richer. The farmers who were supposed to chase money are in debt. The farmers serving the earth, protecting biodiversity, protecting the bees and the soil organisms actually have higher incomes. And then they're creating a net of other support systems, the dyers, the weavers. Let us reimagine a world that is nonviolent. Let us do it together. I call this project the Fibers of Freedom. I would love to work with you all to see how we can make it the new imagination for a post-COVID world. Thank you.